Salut, c'est Clément de Mouvement Conscient et dans cette vidéo, je vais vous proposer une discussion très intéressante que j'ai pu avoir avec Joseph Bartz. Alors, Joseph Bartz est un coach en mouvement duquel j'ai entendu parler pour la première fois il y a pas mal d'années. Il était passé sur une chaîne YouTube allemande qu'il avait interviewé. Il se trouve que à l'époque, Joseph, c'était un des étudiants d'Ido Portal. Il a aidé Ido pour ses stages, etc. Il est toujours présent, il a voyagé avec lui. Et vu que je m'intéresse à Ido Portal, c'est comme ça que j'avais entendu parler de lui pour la première fois, et déjà à l'époque je trouvais qu'il disait des choses très intéressantes, mais en plus par la suite il est un peu sorti de ce moule, il a créé finalement sa propre philosophie au lieu de simplement être sous l'aile d'Ido, et donc je trouve qu'il apporte vraiment des choses qui sont très intéressantes. Il apporte beaucoup de nuances par rapport au mouvement, par rapport à la force, la souplesse, la vie de manière générale, et raison pour laquelle j'avais envie de vous proposer cette discussion. Je trouve qu'il est il a un peu ce côté hippie par rapport au mouvement que j'aime beaucoup, et donc non seulement on va parler de la culture du mouvement de manière générale, finalement qu'est-ce que c'est la culture du mouvement aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce que c'est le mouvement, qu'est-ce que c'est la force, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire maintenant d'avoir un corps qui est fort, un corps qui est fonctionnel. Mais on va parler aussi de sujets beaucoup plus larges comme l'attention, le fait qu'on ait de moins en moins d'attention dans la vie de tous les jours, mais on va également parler de ce que ça veut dire de vivre sa vie pleinement, et même si ça peut paraître des sujets assez larges et pas forcément en rapport au mouvement, il y a énormément finalement de choses qu'on peut lier, et en plus de ça, il apporte vraiment, je le répète, des nuances qui sont ultra intéressantes. Donc voilà, je vous propose une discussion avec Joseph Bartz, c'est un coach allemand, on a parlé en anglais, vous pouvez maintenant mettre les sous-titres, du coup tout a été traduit en français pour que vous puissiez comprendre la vidéo, et voilà, j'espère que ça va beaucoup vous plaire. Moi je l'ai trouvé ça vraiment très intéressant, j'ai appris plein de trucs, et voilà, c'est parti.
So I know you wrote an article about it, but I thought it would be nice to hear you talk about it in person. So when people think about movement, they usually think maybe about Ido Portal and the mindset that you should move a lot every day, like 8 hours a day. And you should be super disciplined because it's very important for your body, your brain, your health, etc. But you seem way more chill about that. So I know that you don't practice as much as you used to, especially since you had kids. And I know that you don't practice strength as much as before. And that's why I want to ask you a really basic but profound question, which is how much should you move?
Okay, yeah, you're directly going to the heart of the thing, I see.
Yeah.
That's nice. So, okay, so the basic premise that I have is that the practice should serve the person and should serve a real purpose, because I struggle a bit with seeing the sense in saying you should move a lot and gain all these abilities and so on, when it is clear that for general health, it's not needed to train for 4 hours or 6 hours every day. That's just very clear. That is not needed to feel healthy, to be healthy, to not have any unnecessary pains, and so on. So the question arises automatically from your question is, what is your purpose? What should you do in life? And for some people, it can be the purpose in their life to devote everything to movement, definitely. And I think this is also for society a very positive thing, some people paint paintings for their life. Yeah. And some people climb the highest mountains or something like this. But it's not something for everyone to climb the highest mountains. Like our society would also not be functional, because the people that climb the highest mountains are heavily dependent on the people that are not climbing the highest mountains, the people that produce their food, the people that create the cars with whom they go to the highest mountains or fly the airplanes or make the ropes that they use and so on and so forth. And it is the same with the movement world. Like if you say you need to move a lot and devote your whole life, then this is only possible because other people are taking care of the other things that you are not taking care of. So for the, let's say for the general public, a more sustainable idea would be to condense the experience of the people that devote so much time into it in a way that they can benefit from it without giving up their life, as I would assume that a person is doing good things and important things in their life, and I would find it a bit presumptuous to say, no, you have to now devote much more time moving because otherwise you run into problems. Like, I don't know, my grandparents also didn't move their whole day, and I think they did quite fine in their life. Obviously, they have also their problems and ailments and so on and so forth, but in a sense that doesn't change their life's work. So you can also call this sub-optimization. Sub-optimization if you optimize a part, but the whole is suffering from it. So imagine you want to improve your diet for your health, but you become so absorbed into absorbing your diet that actually your health is declining because you're not taking care anymore of all the other factors of health. Mm-hmm. And this you have to be careful about, I would say. But again, with this thing that it is very good that there are people that are putting so much effort and energy into practice, into movement, which I would say is also my main thing to practice. But many of the hours nowadays, for me, I also spend teaching and putting it in a way that is digestible for the people. This a lot of my effort is going into the digestion of all the practice that I did. Yeah, how can a 60-year-old benefit from this that has problems with his or her back, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, full stop.
All right. Yeah, I see what you mean. And I totally agree. And on some other level, sometimes I feel that in the movement culture, you're kind of shamed if you're not practicing enough. Let's say if you say to a climber, "Oh, I climb 2 times a week," he'll be like, "Oh, great, that's cool." But if you say, "Oh, I have like a movement practice like 2 times a week," people will be like, "Oh, that's not movement. That's not a practice. What are you doing? You should be doing a lot more." It's like if you don't do it every day, then you're not doing movement. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it also shows that the word movement here is not meaning to look at the movement capacity of the human being in an unfiltered way, but it's already a discipline, a thing that has certain rules, certain rules of conduct, certain rules of how you should behave, what you should do, and so on and so forth. And this I'm very uninterested in. Like, I don't care about this nonsense, Yeah, then it becomes like not a community. No, it's a community. Yeah, it's a community, but and a community then with a bit of an in-group, out-group thing going on, which I would hope not to have in the things that I do. And I don't want to talk badly about movement culture because I also don't know so much what's going on there. In a sense, it seems to me also a bit abstract, but let's say theoretically, there is always the danger when things evolve that they evolve from something more liquid and foggy into something that is more hard. And I've seen this also in the parkour world, for example, where there was a time when there was a lot of talk about what is parkour and what is not, which is eventually whatever, you know, like just take the basic concept of, okay, we are in the environment and we are instead of just going on the paths that are laid out by the architects, also going over walls and reinterpreting the city or the environment or whatever, and doing that. But then for some time, people were fighting about if you do flips, is this called parkour, or what's the philosophy behind it, and so on. And this creates a lot of division, a divide in the people that would not be necessary. Obviously, there are different types of practitioners. I have also my way of practicing, and not necessarily I can practice well with everyone. You know, there are people where for me it's okay, yeah, I'm not sure if it fits so well, like the two of us, because we have a bit different way, and that's okay also, and so on. But it's all becomes a bit difficult for me if the community of people, which is also often actually not the founders of the community, but the people that come after it, that in the parkour, I think it was also like this, you know, like we as the people that started parkour after were like talking so super strictly, whereas I think the people that started with this stuff were much more careless about what is it and what is it not, and not so invested into fighting about it. It shows a bit that you are at a lower level of the of the thing, that you fight about things about how much you should practice and so on. I feel, I mean, yeah, definitely there are also creators of disciplines that are super strict about it and very protective, and maybe the movement culture is something like this. I'm not sure, or let's say I don't want to go too much into that. But yeah, I think it's good not to invest yourself too much into such nonsense of who is doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. Is it a full stop or?
It's a full stop. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you're very kind, Clément. You're very kind of letting me talk. I'm used also other things. So I will from now on always say full stop when I'm finished.
All right. We can do it with the same with the walkie-talkies when you say over after each sentence. So when you told me that, I was thinking, when you said that some people are trying to be like really protective about their practice, and in a way I can relate to that, because let's say every practice has a soul, let's say. So with movement, that might be actually being a generalist and confronting yourself to difficult situation and to grow out of it. And I think like these days we see a lot of people calling movement, let's say, just doing handstands and splits. And just because it's, I don't know, like perhaps like in their minds, like more functional in the way that this is being called movement nowadays. So I get that there's like certain people want to protect that soul. But on the other hand, I think that if you're too protective, then you're actually closing down every person that could be creative and add something new to the culture. So I think in a way, it's a very fine line to walk to encourage new things and encourage self-expression while still guarding what's, or let's say what most people think is precious about that practice.
And isn't that exactly the thing that I said before, that this problem is actually a problem of misinterpretation by the followers of the movement culture? Because I think Ido stopped many years or several years to have so much emphasis on handstand and strength into what he's publishing.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, because it might be the truth that I cannot see everything that is posted. Who knows? But from what I know, he went much more into posting about martial arts things and dance things and speed and agility and working with balls and so on and so forth. So maybe some people are just super stuck in what their leader of the movement culture has shown before and just crystallized around that. Because I mean, if you see and you read what he and other public figures of this work are publishing, then I think you should actually not come to the conclusion that this is about handstands and muscle ups. It seems to me like a complete delusion of what is happening, and maybe the how do I say, not weakness, but the problem of where the attention is going of the people. Yeah, a bit like some circus artists once told me also about their problem, that people don't understand, the audience doesn't understand what is actually hard and what is not. They clap at they clap at the wrong things. Yeah. And are for the circuit artists like, okay, like this everyone can do, guys. But what I just did before did get no applause, but I worked for this for 20 years. And it seems a bit maybe similar with something like this, where the flashy things like handstand and muscle ups and blah, 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 splits, they get a lot of attention because they are so outwardly on the one end, but on the other end also so easy for people to understand that this is amazing. Yeah, or everyone knows, wow, a handstand. Yeah, or also someone that has no idea of movement is, in a sense, impressed by that. So to sum it up, I would say it's maybe a problem of the following of the I'm about to say of the cult of the following of the culture, and not so much that the people that are shaping the culture are actually doing. It's a misrepresentation, is not the right word, but misinterpretation of what's happening, because the eyes are brought to look at certain things. And I mean, it's for me all the time, that people come and I give them stuff and then they're a bit disappointed because it's not directly super flashy. That's my everyday bread somehow, I feel. Yeah, like someone told me yesterday that for her to do 1 minute sets in Stromp stuff. Stromp is the word that I use for sort of joint mobility. So one set of, for example, circling the hand is very difficult for her. After 40 seconds, she has to take a rest. And that's very common for the people. Like 1 minute is long to do something so small and simple, where you still have to focus to do it correctly, but it's nothing. It doesn't there's no explosion, and there's also it evolves slowly in front of you. It's not directly bodily change and you feel very nice after. No, you do this work here and you feel the same after, maybe. It takes some time to develop, and that's the more monastic side of practice that I really like. I really like it. People always say in a workshop that or in my training, I say, Joseph, we're doing things very long here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They say, yes, I like it. I like it to do things long time and see what happens. Just turn your wrist, turn your hand, long time. What happens? Let's just do it, because I think it does something with the mind. It eventually sort of heals you from the need of the flashiness of the explosion and so on. When you can find the universe in the small things, like you just sit there now in autumn and see how the autumns fall from in the autumn, how the leaves fall from the tree. And that's enough. That's enough of explosion in your life. Full stop.
I want to go back to something we said earlier, because I think it relates to a question that I want to ask you, which is that, let's say on Instagram, you obviously post a lot of things about movements, but your Instagram bio doesn't even mention it. Instead, you chose the following sentence, which is how to live a good life in the modern world. So I think it relates to what we were just saying earlier. And so I was wondering why that sentence, and what does this mean to you? And why do you want to talk about it? Why did you choose that lens of practice and not something else, let's say?
First of all, some credit for this sentence to my friend Sascha Fast. I stole it from him. And I want to look at the things holistically. And my Instagram account is it's not always so accurate about it, because the things that I find on my phone that I think, I write something about this and I post this, are often very movement related. But as I told you, basically before we started our talk, is my main practice at the moment is working with wood, for example. I practice. This is what I see as the thing that I do. And I show this approach of practicing to other people. And for me, practicing means also looking at, or very connected with this, is this question: what does it mean to live a good life nowadays? Because in the Middle Ages, it might have meant something different, because today we have other things happening, especially today in an age of digitalization, for example, where there are jobs that have never been before there. There are ways of connecting with each other that have never been before. Yeah, like our way of talking here with each other through the internet, seeing each other, which was a Star Trek thing recently. This was happening in Star Trek, and now this is happening. We're not flying through the Delta Quadrant, but with warp speed, but we have this from Star Trek. So things are changing so rapidly that, in a sense, this question is an urgent question, a question that concerns everyone. Everyone is asking this question. So I think it's good to think about it. How shall we live? How shall we do our things? And the movement practice that I do because it's only one part of the thing that I do, and I hope it gets somewhat through this message, is like I already said in the beginning, like with your first question, is bound to being, or how do I say it, is set up as a servant to this question. Yeah, like, okay, we to say very profane in a sense, we are sitting a lot nowadays. We don't move so much. So a movement practice has a good place in today's world, because we have many ailments in our Western societies that come from not moving enough. That's very clear. I mean, there's no discussion about that, in a sense that we are not moving enough. So movement practice, good idea. Yeah, very clear. Another thing to connect it with the woodworking is we live in an industrial age where you can buy everything from Amazon and get it delivered same day or next day. Yeah. So what gets lost in a society that is so much in their head is the ability to build things with your own hands and to connect yourself with the environment around you, and having the one of the fundamental experience of the human being, which is to change the world actively with your hands. Because now it seems there's always something in between that, like I type at the computer and then some things is happening, or then a machine is doing this and that. And to do this crafting, which I like about the word crafting, is that etymologically it's very connected with the German word Kraft, which is called strength. Yeah, it's the German, like because you speak German. It's the German word for strength. Crafting is, they have the same root. These words. So there is, and it describes it well. There is a strength in building things, in gardening, for example, or making things from wood, or making your own clothes, or whatever. Things that you can really hold in your hands, that you can touch, because what it creates is also this understanding of, hey, I'm also part of shaping this world. This is a fundamental experience that I think can get lost in, or can be under fire in a world where you can buy everything, and you're also so displaced from how things are produced, because they are either produced in other countries and so on, or they're produced by machines, and there's not much human touch there. Yeah, so this is what I'm looking at, and this is why I have this in my Instagram bio. That the question that guides me is, what is the good life in today's world, in the modern life? And another question connected with it, or a thing connected with this, is proposing life as a practice, as something where you can take action, take responsibility, and be at the steering wheel of your own ship, to make it sound very, very epic.
So I have one last question to ask you, which is a question I like to ask everybody because I feel really connected to it, which is, what does having a strong body mean to you?
It means that you are able to do what you need or want to do, and that you can be of service to what is around you, to yourself also, but you are strong, your body is strong, I would say, when it allows you that it allows you to take action. So it's not about how much push-ups you do or something like this, but it's this like, okay, my physical self shall be in a shape that is allowing me to take the actions that I feel I want to do to serve my purpose or vision or my duty or my way of servicing, however you want to, from whichever angle you want to approach it. Yeah, that would be my answer. Full stop.
Bah écoutez, voilà, j'espère que cette discussion vous a plu. Donc là, c'est juste une partie de nos discussions du coup qui a été traduite en français. Si vous voulez voir la discussion complète, vous pouvez cliquer sur le lien YouTube qui est dans la description. C'est le premier lien. Comme ça, vous allez pouvoir voir la discussion complète. Voilà, comme ça, là, j'ai mis déjà une partie de la discussion du coup traduite. Et du coup, j'ai pris les passages les plus intéressants pour les personnes qui n'ont pas beaucoup de temps. Et si maintenant, vous êtes arrivé jusque-là, vous voulez en savoir davantage, vous voulez écouter la discussion complète, cliquez sur le lien et ça vous mettra tout de suite sur la vidéo. Donc voilà, grand merci à Joseph Bartz d'avoir pris le temps de discuter avec moi. C'était vachement cool. Je vais aussi vous mettre du coup dans la description le lien vers son site. Du coup, il a une partie qui est écrite aussi en anglais. Du coup, ne vous en faites pas. Du coup, toutes les informations seront faciles à trouver. Et je vous mettrai également un lien vers son Instagram. Il propose vraiment des choses ultra intéressantes, des stages très intéressants. Un stage auquel j'ai pu participer. Il fait également des stages dans la nature, tout ce qui est survie, ce genre de choses, de crafting, créer des choses avec ses propres mains. Du coup, il propose vraiment des choses très intéressantes que très peu de coachs en mouvement proposent finalement. Donc, je vous invite grandement à aller découvrir son site et son Instagram. Et donc voilà, si vous avez aimé la vidéo, n'hésitez pas à mettre un j'aime. Comme ça, la vidéo sera mieux répertoriée et plus de personnes vont la voir. Donc ça, c'est vachement cool pour nous. Du coup, pour moi et pour Joseph. Et voilà, si vous avez des questions, des choses que vous ne comprenez pas, n'hésitez pas à les mettre dans les commentaires, je répondrai à tout le monde. Et si vous avez quelque chose de spécifique à demander par rapport à Joseph, je pourrais toujours lui envoyer la question et il me dira ce qu'il a envie de répondre et je vous répondrai comme ça dans les commentaires. C'est tout pour moi. Et passez une bonne journée. Bye.